Good evening and welcome to Just Seriously Voicing Thoughts with me, Kriss Venugopal. And today I have the pleasure of having a person who has a unique facet to present to everyone, Bharti Kannan, a person who works on gender health and a social entrepreneur who runs the organization called Boond. Welcome to the show, Bharti. And first of all, let me start with welcoming you to a world where uh, a lot of terminology what you use is totally different from what we hear on a day-to-day basis. So we'll talk about the different aspects. First of all, let me welcome you to the show. Welcome to Just Seriously.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's really nice to be here.
Bharti, Boond as an organization, some topic which everyone has some limitations to talk about, menstruation. And when you actually talk about the menstruators as such, you're catering to cisgenders, transgenders, and all the menstruators, and that's pan India what you're doing. The first question which comes to my mind is when you take two states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu is a place where the attaining of puberty is a festival and you see flex and it's publicized saying it is a totally entirely different scenario. Whereas in other parts of India, there are places where you don't even talk about it. It's a hush hush kind of stuff. So I want to know about your experience in reaching out about menstrual health and the condition what you actually faced when you started and your present state.
Sure. Thanks for that question. So you began with talking about how in Tamil Nadu and Kerala we probably celebrate monarchy, and in different other parts of the country, it's stigmatized and taboo. And the ways in which menstruation manifests in a menstruating person's life from the time they hit puberty to throughout the reproductive cycle, up until menopause and so on and so forth afterwards. I feel everyone experiences it differently based on their socioeconomic and cultural locations. And that actually was the motivation for me to start in this space. And some of the lingo might be slightly different, so Chris, please pause me when you think that I'm speaking in a way that is unfamiliar to the audience that we are speaking to. And my experience has been that different states, of course, and cultures have a very selective approach towards how they view menstruation and what they allow, disallow, someone to do and perform in their everyday life, whether it is within families, whether it is within an educational institutions, whether it's in public spaces. For example, let's talk about Kerala and the whole debate and discourse around whether a woman or a person is allowed to enter the Sabrimala temple, or let's take, for instance, how girls are set aside in a menstruating hut in different parts of India. It happens from Tamil Nadu to Bihar, and in fact, Nepal, for example, has a law that decriminalizes such a practice. But the crux of what I'm trying to say is that every menstruator experiences menstruation differently, and we're many times we focus on just the cultural location and their access and ability to buy different kinds of menstrual products and how they manage and maintain themselves during their periods, their access to toilets in public spaces, and how safe they feel when they travel, when they seek leisure, when they seek opportunities for work, education, so on and so forth. But also that this is a human body and they're going through the cycle on an everyday basis, because the cycle is not just when someone bleeds, it's throughout the month, from the beginning of bleeding through the various phases of the menstrual cycle, which culminates in bleeding. And the way in which someone experiences this depends again on their biology, on the kind of stressors they have in their life, as well as the way people live and engage and have access to healthcare, family planning, contraception, so on and so forth. So it is such a multifaceted issue that has connections with sexual health, with waste management, with access to water and sanitation. And I'll take a pause and a breather here.
Yeah. When you have said about the waste management part, yes, the disposing the pads, we were talking about Muruganandam and his efforts to make pads affordable to all women around the world, or probably the low income group. So that was taken up as a whole scenario where it was taken to TED and other talks, everything. So, what is your take on that?
Sorry, Chris, I lost your question. You referred to Muruganandan, and I heard you till the bit where what is your? Are you asking for my take on that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Chris.
Yeah, yeah. So I was asking about Muruganandam, who actually made it economically viable for women in India to afford pads, and he made it is cost effective, and it was talked about in a very big way, like being made into a movie, and all the aspects were highlighted so much. So your take on that aspect of making pads available for, because you're talking about menstrual awareness. So what is your take on it?
Sure. So my two stance on that is that I think we can look at it in multiple lenses. So let's begin with the most easier bit of menstruation and waste. I think as a model per se of the intention and bringing access to women to be able to procure pads with discretion, with the ability to pay maybe 1 rupee or 2 rupees to access pads. I think all of that was on point. However, the any product needs to be viewed from the perspective of its life cycle, and in that case this particular way of taking pads to communities has been a little bit of a problematic issue, and that is not a standalone issue because that is the issue with larger disposable pads in itself, which can be any multinational corporation selling and producing these pads in mass. So that remains to be an issue because anyone who produces it in some way has an end user responsibility, end responsibility to be able to manage that. And as we know, most of the pads are made with over 90 to 99% of plastic, and we very well know that we can't really burn plastic, we can't really dig plastic, and we don't know ways in which to manage plastic, especially that's soaked with body fluids. But that's only one angle, or one way to look at the prism. The other way is also to look at the business modeling itself. And my two cents after working in the space for almost a decade is that it has been a hard bargain, because this is a model where you buy a pad making unit for about a lakh or so, with some subsidies and some access to microfinance, and a group of women come together, mostly who have a self-help group in villages or in towns. And what happens there is that they produce these pads, which is the easier bit, because there's some training, there's raw material that is provided for it, and they're able to package it, and that cycle seems to be robust. But I think the trouble, from what I've understood, that comes is that the sustainability, the financial sustainability of running something like this, because one, they have to make back this money, and two is they have to continue doing this over a prolonged period of time. And for many of these women who are first time entrepreneurs, probably who are coming from a certain specific low income group, they probably don't have the skills in marketing it. They might have a word of mouth technique, they might have some access and social mobility that limits them to do certain kinds of activities that is needed to run the business. But the third thing is that we know, by virtue of working in this space, is the model per se has garnered a lot of support. Yet we've noticed that a lot of the self-help groups have chosen to discontinue production of the pads itself. So to sum it up, I think the environmental sustainability is up for question for sure, and some relooking on the business modeling is also up for sure. Having said all of this, I would like to give due credit to the fact that something that he started, as an enabler of choice, an agency for people who menstruate, I think it's great. And being inspired by him, some mainstream movies have been done, and however problematic the portrayal of menstruation may have been, there has been debate and discourse around menstruation by virtue of making a mainstream Bollywood movie, or a movie that kind of models this approach of making pads in an Oscar-winning documentary, so on and so forth. So, but basically, the attention to the issue, a definite, thumbs up for that.
That brings me to another question of Boond uh, really advocating menstrual cups and cloth pads, where when the whole aspect of sanitary napkins came up, they always said, "Who will use cloth? Like, why should a person use a cloth? Because it's unhygienic." They were talking about a lot of issues. So, are we going back to that point where the advertising was just for promoting the disposable pads, or are you looking at a different angle when you're talking about cloth pads and also the Boond advocating menstrual cups?
So I do think, advertising and media has had a role to kind of make something like a disposable pad very aspirational for a lot of us. Whether we come from urban centers, rural centers, it doesn't matter. I think it was aspirational for my mother to use a pad by virtue of the economic strata she came from. It is aspirational for somebody in a village today to be able to use a pad, because the way in which pads are portrayed, there's a girl who is running in tight white pants, conquering the world in some way or the other. So definitely it's an issue in the way in which someone is portraying and selling aspiration than actually a pad in itself, and we all buy into it, as is the case with a lot of products that we consume. But I think the larger issue beyond the economic access is equity and choice. I want to know what I'm putting in my body or close to my body for a prolonged period of time, and we on average, we all know that a menstruator bleeds about 3 to 5 days, and that's close to about 7 years through an entire lifetime if one were to bleed at one go together. I'd really like to know what I'm putting close to my body. I want to know what the effects of putting that close to my body is, apart from the more visceral and immediate effects of knowing that wearing a pad can cause itching, so on and so forth. For different people, different kinds of things. But what goes into the pad? What kind of chemicals? What kind of toxicants? What kind of reproductive irritants? So on and so forth. And in fact, there's a very path-breaking study that was made by an organization called Women's Voices of the Earth, which not only does research on products like pads, but any sort of product, like from cosmetics and so on and so forth, and what we've been told by multinational corporations in order to fulfill and meet their bottom lines. But beyond that, I'd like to also say that the minute we start using cloth pad, or any cloth for that matter, I think we no longer will buy into the idea that somebody is telling us what is sterile and clean, but we are able to control the sterility and the hygiene of what we're using, provided we know how to do that. Of course, there's some knowledge that needs to be imbibed and imparted to be able to do that, and certain basic lifestyle amendments in the way that we manage our periods, in the way we wash the cloth, in the way that we dry the cloth, so on and so forth. But it definitely shifts the paradigm in a way that I don't have to consume something because someone tells me that that's the only clean option I have, and just because the pad looks white and clean, it doesn't mean that it is the topmost option for me. That brings me to a more modern way of managing periods, which of course is a menstrual cup. And Chris, you'd be surprised to know that the first menstrual cup came in the 1870s, if I remember right. And of course, it was not made of the current material that we use today, which is silicone. It was made of metal, and of course, there were many other versions in latex and rubber after that. But it was because of a revolution in silicone that in the last 20 to 25 years, we've had a lot more expansion and products in this space. And I think the again the game changer here is that silicone, as we know, is a material that is inert, and we use it, for feeding babies from, in a feeding bottle nipple, or whether it is about having medical devices made of silicone, whether it's blood transfusion, whether it's silicone breast implants, and many other things, because it is allowed as medically known to be safer to use close to our body for prolonged periods of time. But not only that is essential, again, this is also in this case also we flip the paradigm where we control the sterility of what we're using. You can clean the cup as efficiently as you want to, and you're being told how to, and you again control the sterility of the product that you use. Beyond the fact that both of these products help menstruators get closer to their bodies, understand their form, function, shape, size, so on and so forth, because even for using a cup, one needs to be able to be intimately aware with their vaginas, how their body functions, how blood smells, how blood feels, which is not something that is possible when you use even sometimes cloth or a cloth pad, or a disposable pad. And all of this helps you understand your body better, and by virtue of that help seek health better, by virtue of the fact that, okay, I'm bleeding this much, I'm bleeding what seems normal for me now, but it might change over a course of time, and that is different, and I'm able to articulate that better to a doctor. But at the end of it, it is a huge environmental cost, an economic cost that we're saving for each and every individual. Like, if you just think about it, if I were to buy pads all through my life, and let's say I'm buying the most cheapest pad available in the market, I'd probably be spending 30,000 rupees through my lifetime. But let's say I'm buying a fairly reasonably expensive pad that's like 1.5 lakhs. I mean, it's a for somebody, it could be an aspiration of buying themselves a laptop, or like seeking an education, or having an international trip. And what's really important at the end of it is that we provide the choice for menstruators to be able to choose with information what they want to use for the different times of their lifestyle of their life. For example, I've been using a cup pretty much for all my life, but off late I feel the need to shift my cup with using a cloth pad, because that's what feels comfortable and easy for me off late. So I'll take a breather there.
Having said that, let me come to an aspect where the inclusiveness of awareness. If you ask a boy or a man or probably a husband about, say, menstrual awareness, I would really feel that people would be shocked or probably taken aback that such a question is being posed to a man. So, how far did you have difficulties in spreading the awareness when you specifically say about the inclusive nature?
Actually, that's a very that's a great question to ask, Chris, because we've worked with people across the board. It might be a school, it might be a corporate organization, it might be the government agency, and many times when we go approach them, uh, by virtue of the fact that we use the M word, we will be relegated to speak to either a woman or say it's a lady's problem. And it takes enormous amount of effort and skill on our parts to be able to evangelize and say it isn't a lady's problem whatsoever. But beyond that, it isn't only a menstruator's problem either. I think, let's take a conventional family, a heterosexual family, a heteronormative family, a partner, a husband who wants to care for his wife, wants to really understand his wife's experience of the world, I think needs to tune in to understanding how within her home she is discriminated or not, within public spaces how she feels. But more than that, let's say she has fatigue, and not in a euphemistic or caring way, but just to understand the difference that on certain days some person needs a little more attention and care, a care that the husband's getting in so many other ways. And this isn't quid pro quo, it's something that you do for a human being who's having a unique and differential lived experience. And I guess I guess actually being able to talk to men and engaging men is actually a big game changer in the space of not just menstruation, but sex and reproduction itself. Menstruation is very closely linked with family planning. It is something that people want to understand whether they want to get pregnant, whether they don't want to get pregnant, whether they want to, look at alternative fertility options. It is so integral to all of that. And I guess men also need to understand, and should at least try to engage with it. I understand that a lot of men feel hesitant because we've heard from men in safe spaces that when they try to engage about it, their women, the women in their lives or their compatriots, have made fun of them, have mocked at them, have said, "Why are you asking such questions?" and even penalized them. So I guess even the menstruators and women ought to do better in being able to include them in the conversation, and in the context of the conversation. But I guess it's a two-way street, and some comfort and ease needs to flow. Not just two-way, I mean, I don't want to be so binary, but it's a very flowing street, and it ought to be like flowing in the way that we ask questions with some sense of curiosity and empathy, to be able to whet our appetites, and our own curiosities, but most importantly to be able to comfort and show solidarity around menstruation and lived experiences.
Bharti, let me give you a personal experience where I was a very small kid, and one of our, say, a neighbor, had sent me to buy pads. And it was actually a hush topic when it was being spoken, like she made him buy pads. So that was a point of mockery which shocked me that, yeah, something wrong. Is there something wrong? So even I've seen many husbands, even amongst my friends, I would say they are reluctant to go to say, a shop and shop for say, a sanitary napkin or a menstrual cup. And it seems to be a topic of taboo. How do we tackle this?
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I think many of us have such uncomfortable experiences in our lives, and I think the key to all of this is to be breaking the silence. But by breaking silence does not happen just like that, right? We all need to be able to sit with our discomforts, and there are various strategies. As a business, as a social enterprise, I can tell you we have tried to tackle this in many ways. We've run different sort of campaigns for different target audiences, to be able to help them at least discourse around menstruation in ways that they can at least come up with their questions, seek some answers, even make fun of it in some way and laugh about it in safe spaces. But I think really the key to it is, one, to look at it from a place of science, to understand that just because it's coming from where between where we poop and pee, it isn't a dirty thing per se. In fact, menstrual blood has stem cells. Menstrual blood is probably the only excretion from our bodies we don't know how to effectively use, and it isn't necessarily toxic like how our feces and urine is. Menstrual blood, in fact, we also don't know why we bleed as often as we bleed and for how long we bleed. There's a lot of questions that remains unanswered. So if we're able to dialogue about this a little more, and if companies, whether it's your workplace, my workplace, whether it's an educational institute, is able to create a space to have mixed gender sessions. Why do we have to put the girls aside and the boys aside in any way and talk about this separately? Maybe you can do that for some initiation and bring them onto a level of comfort. But the idea is that we cohabit in a world where people identify with different genders and sexualities, and we ought to be able to speak about something as simple and common and everyday as menstruation, in where more than half the population of the world does bleed, and it's a no brainer that we ought to do this. And having said that, it is hard and it is difficult, otherwise businesses like ours don't need to exist. And it's a big issue around the world, and there are so many countries coming up with various strategies, laws, and dialogues around what one should do in terms of subsidies, in terms of welfare programs. So it is a very big issue, but I think the issue is something that can be solved, to some extent by sitting with our own discomforts around our normal body and biological functions, to be able to sit across my grandfather and say that I'm bleeding, and for him to accept that and to not be shocked into hell because someone shared that, or for someone to come and say with ease that I did not bleed, and be open to why that may have happened before jumping to conclusions like I'm pregnant. So to be able to really accord space to everybody in every ecosystem, I think is the key to being able to tackle something as big as this.
On that, let me also uh, welcome all the listeners here: VH, Sonia, Haja Maideen, KR Nair, Fanaiki, Anita Rajendran, Semi, Saumya, Kanimuri, Navya Ganeshan, Bhaglakshmi, that's my mother, Rishabh Saxena, A. Kumar, Kumudini, Madhavan, and Shiba Nazar. And I would open the floor. We have Madhavan who has raised his hand. So, yes, Madhavan, you can actually talk to Bharti right now.
Hi, Bharati and Chris. It's wonderful session. One more session actually. You were talking about men inclusion.
Yes.
Um, I have an experience. It's like almost like a jolt. It happened, but in a funny way.
Hmm.
When my daughter got what do you call this, attained the age, my wife messaged me saying that yes, she has attained the age. When I stepped into the house, my daughter came and hugged me and conveyed this message in such a joy and said that as if she got a medal. I did not know how to react to that at that point of time. But subsequently, what has really happened is she could tell me what kind of a napkin, what brand, how it looks, or what is the specification to that extent. So I can go and buy in the shop without any hesitation whatsoever. It so happened to me, so I have been included without my knowledge into the whole process, but somehow it was a right, it is a very good experience for me. I had to thank my daughter for this actually. So I don't know how many daughters can go and tell their parents or father, brother, saying that this is what happened, I need this, or it is again a common thing among women. If that is possible within the house, I think it will be a big change.
Yes, Bharti, your take on that.
Thanks so much for sharing that. It's an encouraging story to always hear daughters being able to go up to their fathers and speak without shame about whether hitting puberty or asking for products. It's amazing to hear that. I just like to add as a flavor here that a lot of violence begins in homes, and homes and families and as institutions not only produce it but perpetrate it across generations. When Mr. Dhana Madhavan was talking, he was saying that how many households can actually have an experience where a daughter goes and speaks to her father, and that's true. But that's the more subtle and easier issue that may come up. The more abusive and violent issues can be ways in segregating someone from doing what they really want to do. Or you've grown up, or in Dhana Madhavan's words, attained age or hit puberty, then you need to censor yourself in certain ways. You need to be back home by a certain time. Uh, like in a way that safety wasn't important prior to menstruation, but it's become more enhanced now by virtue of someone's ability to be pregnant, or someone's ability to have sexual promiscuity. But the point is that homes, we've all seen the movie The Great Indian Kitchen, which was an amazing storytelling about what happens in a particular uh, caste and economic location, and that is kind of true. But at the same time, let's think about our domestic help. So women who work in factories, or menstruators who are working on the farming fields, the kind of respite and the issues they may have in the context that they live in, they are not going to be able to get any sort of leave or respite, or they can't go to their employers and say, I'm tired and I want to be able to rest. They might not have a job tomorrow if they did that. So I think in general, whether our homes if our homes were able to constructively accord space to it, and treat menstruation not as a malice or as a malice or disease, I think we'd have more better workspaces and the world in general that can accept menstruation as a very normal biological phenomena, and then address the care that every menstruator may need, by virtue of, there are so many people who live with menstrual disorders. Ask your wife, ask your daughter, ask anybody around you. They're going to tell you that I have a very bad premenstrual phase, or I live with PCOS, all these terms that you hear. And the statistics are mind boggling. Someone's living predominantly with some sort of everyday inability to be able to either regulate their emotions, or a predisposition to suicide or suicidal tendencies, or just generally a lot of flux and fatigue and pain of various kinds. I think we'd rather pay more attention to all of those needs than actually speak about, whether it's okay for us to be able to talk about menstruation itself. So I think kudos to families that are able to create that space. But the discourse needs to expand a lot more beyond whether I can talk freely about it, because what is free is really dependent on context. A girl might have a very normative and easy period or a easy menstrual life that's amazing, but someone else predominantly may not. And are we able to, as families and as institutions, provide space for that? That's the bigger question we want to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Bhakti, for that. A different take and a different understanding. Probably, I really feel voicing thoughts more than voice here. The thoughts are really more bright today. Thank you, Madhavan, for that sharing that experience. And today, now we have Santosh, Soumya Santosh. She is the academic head for PKD School, Pollachi. Soumya, yeah, the stage is all yours.
Yeah. Hi, Bharti.
Hi, Soumya.
Hi. Hi, Krishna. Just I just have a doubt. Uh, how do you feel this menstrual cups? Uh, uh, what's the challenge in spreading an awareness in the public? Like, how do you sensitize? Because I'll tell you personally, I actually got a menstrual cup and it's still lying there. I'm still scared to come out of my comfort zone of having sanitary pads to the cups. So, what's your thing about it? Like, is it a challenge for you to spread that sensitization?
I think it's a great question, Soumya, and I want to reiterate that actually this is what you're sharing. It takes a lot of courage to admit that you have a cup and you haven't been able to use it, because in a conversation where waste and economics and body agency is heightened, sometimes it might sound like for another person that they ought to choose a menstrual cup or a cloth pad or anything that is more sustainable, and we ought to live those kind of lives because we're all woke. We all want to live much more informed lives. So thank you for sharing that, but I want to tell you that that's a very normal experience. I got my first cup maybe 3 years before I even used it. I asked a bunch of my friends if they'd want to try it, and most of them refused to do it. And there are reasons for it. There are many challenges on an individual level. Wearing something inside the vagina feels like a Herculean task. It's unimaginable, in fact, to be able to take menstrual education in a way where you are able to tell a menstruator, and the menstruator is able to accept that it's like any other body part. Take a look at your vagina if you want to, in a mirror. See, feel yourself if you need to. All of that is quite stigmatized because it's also associated with sex. It's associated with pleasure, and we all need to admit that the world that we live in does not want to focus on that whatsoever, and is probably scared or intimidated, or the patriarchal world that we're living in does not enable us to freely speak and engage with it. And let's and we don't have many safe spaces within our own lives. If I were to have gone to my mother years ago to speak about this, she'd probably say, what are you saying? Don't do this. Or what, I think you just want to try something so different. What's wrong with you? I'm pretty sure my mother would have said something like that. But the point is, the kind of awareness that this needs is not a one time sort of an awareness. Everyone has their own learning curves. For example, at Boon, let's say someone buys it off the online shop. Great, they might buy it, Soumya, and many times, like, you might hoard it and keep it in their homes and not find the courage or the right kind of information, or if not peer support, to be able to use this. In fact, there's a study that was done, if I remember right, in Nepal, that showed that if a peer used a menstrual cup, my chances of using a menstrual cup was about 60% higher, because someone I know and trust has already tried something that is a little unheard of. Right. So one point is taking the education, creating a safe space where people ask all kinds of random doubts. As a joke, I can say that, and it's not a joke actually, but trying to come across jovially, that a lot of people will come and ask us, if I wear the cup, how can I pee? And as something as fundamental as that is, if you're born with a certain, with a as female at birth, right? Most of us have three orifices. All of us, in fact, have three orifices below our navel, and we pee out of one, we poo out of one, and of course we bleed out of one, and everything has its own different functions. But just this information seems to be lapsed. And you sit in a room, you create a safe space, you do some exercises to get to know each other, and the first thing you ask them, how many of you think we have three holes or two holes? And a bunch, and the room is divided, it always is divided. You'll see people raise their hands for two holes and raise their hands for three holes. And I'm talking about people who've given birth, who've had sex, who are married, who have children as old as 10, 12. It doesn't matter. That is the kind of misinformation, or kind of a lack of knowledge we are all living in about our own bodies, so let alone wearing a cup, right? At the same time, I guess I really don't want to sound so, abysmal and diffident. I think when menstruators and women have the choice, have the information that's provided to them, and have had the time to absorb it and engage with that information, I think they make leaps and bounds in taking decisions for themselves. If, for example, if we do we've undertaken many sort of awareness programs. We call it menstrual life skills. And in those life skills programs, we've seen that amongst 100 women, and we use only the products as a tool to talk about menstruation. I want to really emphasize on that, because the larger idea is to be able to inculcate and hope that women claim their own choice and agency to be able to do what they want with their bodies, with the information that they have, based on the lifestyle that they're living. Now, having said that, we've noticed that amongst, say, 100 women that we work with, about only 10% to 15% might choose to want a cup immediately. And about 30 to 40% might choose to want to use a cloth pad or continue using the cloth that they were using. And we know that over a period of time, say 6 months or 12 months, we see some small shifts there. So the 15% users of menstrual cups may become 20%, and the 30 to 40% may become 50% of cloth users. But there's still a large majority that still prefers using disposable pads or whatever other method that they were used to using, because let's admit it, there is convenience to it. Whether I'm polluting the world or not, if I wear a pad today and I can go to work and come back and cook and continue around doing my day and the endless chores I have, I would rather choose that than actually think about something like, okay, I have to make a slight adjustment of washing my pad, take extra 5 minutes in my day, when time is such a short resource for a huge number of people out there. And this is because of a lot of the caregiving work that is burden on women itself. But I also want to emphasize, when I'm saying this time period, it's important to note that anybody will have a learning phase when adopting a new product like a menstrual cup. And that learning phase can really vary, because beyond someone's psychosocial barriers that they have to cross to be able to use the cup. There are other factors, like I might live with some sexual trauma, I might live with vaginismus, I might live with other sorts of conditions which prevent me, or I wouldn't say prevent, but inhibit me from accessing my own body in certain ways to be able to use a cup. Or I might have gender dysphoria. Around the spectrum, I think it's really important to note that there is difficulty in terms of knowledge and access, and it's also a one time buy. So if you people have to be willing to spend anywhere between 500 to 1000 rupees, if not more, to be able to procure a cup that's of course going to last a very long time, roughly about 5 to 10 years, based on how you use it, where you're procuring it from and all of that. So there are many trade-offs to think about, and that trade-off is something that we all want to consider and see what works for us. So I completely understand, Soumya. If you feel like you want to take your own sweet time to understand more, talk to more people, then decide when you want to use the cup. In fact, at Booth, if you write to us, and I'm sure other organizations also do this to some extent, you write to us, or you set up a time with us, we will talk to you from within the bathroom to be able to help you with the tricks, the nuances of how to wear the cup and take it off. Because there's no other support than actually hearing from someone who's done this before. And we find that to be very comforting and beneficial. And that's what we've heard from our customers as well as our beneficiaries.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, you've given me some courage to try something like this. So, thank you.
Thank you for asking, Soumya.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samya. And before we have the next listener raise their hands, Bharti, you cater to people like transgenders, cisgenders. So this difference probably the world is yet to understand or yet to accept. And also, my question on an aspect where will there be a world where a brother or a friend can tell a sister, say that, yeah, you want a product, you're having your periods, yes, I can help. Will there be a world like that? How? Because when you're working on the awareness side, you would know whether it is a utopian thought to think so, or will it happen in some time in the future?
It's a little bit of a layered answer. I feel I think that world exists in some pockets. Well, personally, I live in a world like that. I created that world for myself, but that's not necessarily everyone's experience, and not everyone has that freedom and space and liberty to do that. But I really hope that in my lifetime there can be a more mainstream idea or a mainstream space where menstruators can actually say that, I want this, can you please go get this for me? I really hope that will happen. I think with about I think in India we're celebrating and commemorating 10 years of actually actively working on World Menstrual Hygiene Day, which is May 28th. And it's May 28th because it's the global average of 28th is the global average of a period cycle, and 5 days is the global number of days a menstruator bleeds. And so in fact, I have noticed from the time I started Bond, a mushrooming of various enterprises, activists, policies, that the space is really booming. And the world over, we can see that happen. For example, Scotland issued a legislation where every workplace and every toilet has to have free period products, and not just one product, but a basket of products with with all sorts of information on how to use it, as well as facilities for disposal. So the world is heading there for sure. There's a lot of push for it. I think in India, the way in which patriarchy, caste, and class, coincides and manifests requires very specific and innovative ideas to be able to address it. And I think in the years to come that will happen. And I'm hoping in my lifetime I can die before seeing that. I think we're waiting for Chris to join us. If anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Probably there's some glitch for him.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I would like to ask one more thing.
Sure.
What about the ladies who are in the stage of this pre-menopause, post-menopause? Do you give awareness to those ladies, or uh, like the what is the concept of PMT?
Soumya, actually,
Does
it's
Boone?
yeah, it's such an important question. I think the world over, menopause does not get the focus it really needs to get. um, uh, in fact, there's a coalition of people who work the world over on bringing some sort of a facilitator guide. When I mean a facilitator guide, it's a guide for various organizations like us to be able to take menopause care and attention programs, which might be working with the government on welfare, or with families, or directly with individuals itself. It's a very, amongst the menstrual world itself, it's the least spoken about issue, because it's about elderly care, and there's a lot more money in being able to work with the youth, work with people who are in the teens and who are in the peak of their reproductive life. So that's where money normally goes, and that's where attention normally goes. But there's a dire need to do that, and unfortunately at Booth we don't do enough of it on menopause. It is a area of focus that we want to get into, but we're focusing on things that actually that helps us also sustain as an organization, and I have to be very honest about that. So the need exists, and it's a very valid point, and there are so many menstruators who really languish premenopausal and menopausal, and I think public healthcare infrastructure and schemes, as well as access to healthcare, needs to really come with focus there.
Thank you, Bharti. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Samya. Let me also get to one aspect which, say, probably when we are talking about the awareness part, which I had asked earlier also, the transgender, because again, the whole stigma about even meeting or seeing a transgender, or even if somebody says, yeah, my friend is a transgender, the kind of social stigma what we have. And you have coined a common term, menstruators, who they also have a phase of having periods, and which is like the cisgender probably not understanding the transgender, or probably the pangender, or different aspects of it. So how do we tackle that in the say coming days, or probably when we are looking at the future? How do we tackle that is the whole issue as such?
I mean, it's such a big question, Chris. So I don't think I will do justice to it, but I can attempt saying that it requires a more rounded sort of programming across various spaces to be able to be inclusive of various genders, but also various sexualities and identities. And if we're able to respect human beings for how they want to self express and self identify, and accommodate that through policies, through access, through identities, I think we'll do a better job at it. But I'll give you an example. At Booth, we ran a campaign called Ungender Menstruation, and you can look us up on Instagram, and you'll find it's a photography campaign. So there's a campaign where you can see people who identify differently menstruating. You can see their real blood in the pictures, and we had put up this picture of a trans person. Of course, they volunteered to do this, they consented to do this, and so on and so forth. And they identify as a trans male. They menstruate as well. For us to be visually understanding that is what is really important. We might have some inability to make sense of it, but we really need to accord space to the fact that someone chose to do something to their bodies, and someone chose to identify differently, and they must be going through something to be able to do that. And it must have taken a lot of effort and difficulty to navigate that aspect of their life. It might have been easy for some people. I don't know. I've hardly come across someone who's had a very easy journey there. But it's also okay for us to accept that it's mostly about our discomforts. Why should we be uncomfortable about looking at someone who looks very male, who has a mustache, who's presenting in a certain way, does not have breasts, as being able to bleed, but more importantly, by virtue of being able to bleed, they can also give birth. We've seen pictures or people who are trans men who are also parents, who give birth and are able to produce do biological functions that we never imagined men to do before. So I guess we need to shock ourselves a little bit into understanding this, all of us individually and institutionally. We need to be able to have organizations and policies that really allow us to look at people as they want to express themselves, and that is sacrosanct and it's a human right, and I think we really need to work towards a world like that.
Yes, I would also inform the audience that if you have a question, if you want to interact with Bharti, yes, you can raise your virtual hand and ask questions or interact. At the same time, uh, do does the schools at a school level, does the school provide a kind of say a psychological support for those who are attained the age or attained puberty or started menstruating? uh, do you really think that helps? Because there is a psychosomatic link also to it.
I think that's really important to speak about. Thanks, Chris. Um, because menstruation is not just a biological experience, it intersects in so many other spaces of our life, and especially the psychosocial experience. I think schools aren't doing enough. There are some very isolated spaces where schools are trying to do something and get innovative there, but just schools doing it will not be enough. And the reason is, let's say a girl who's for example, in Dintikal in Tamil Nadu, who has access by virtue of Boond or her teachers being proactive, take menstrual life skills to her. This girl goes back to her house and says, "Hey, listen, we've been doing things like this. You've been asking me to stay away from the kitchen, not touch food, not touch pickle, throw my pads, burn it in a certain way, or whatever the practices have been. I'm just throwing what's coming off the top of my head from my experience over the last 8 years." And she goes to her mother or goes to her grandmother, and she probably lives in a joint family, and says, I want to do differently. um, who's in a position of power there? It's the parents. Who's the caregiver there? Whose voice has a larger sound in that household, and whose practices or customs or rationality will be taken into account? It is very rarely that the young girl who's going to school, who's probably a first generation or maybe even a second generation educator in her house, come and say these things of rationality and be accepted. So many times in Bond, when we can manage it, we try to do what we call an ecosystemic approach to menstrual life skills. So let's say we go to a school, we don't just involve the students, we involve the teachers, because a lot of times this is perpetrated by the teacher's own stigma or ignorance, or not being able to engage with their own menstrual bodies, or their own ability to talk with their peers or with their husbands about menstruation. But it can't end there. We involve the parents, we involve the brothers, we involve the staff members who manage the waste in the schools. If we can, we will involve the local asha worker or the A&M, the nurse from the primary healthcare center, the secondary healthcare center. So there needs to be concerted action from all kinds of stakeholders, and only then can we see more systemic change happen. And just working with the girls and just the school is not going to bring a solution, because it's hardly the girls or the menstruators in those age groups who have a say in the spaces that they get to, unless they become adults.
Yeah, Bharti, we would like to know from your side, like, what was the worst kind of response you got when you said you are working on awareness about menstruation?
Uh,
It's just a kind of a reflection to ourselves what our society is. That's why I wanted to ask that question.
I'd really not like to sensationalize that in that way, but maybe I can rephrase that if you don't mind, Chris.
No
Um,
worries, no
so
worries.
um, we've gone to many places, and many times when we talk about menstruation, sex can't be averted in those conversations. And when we create a safe space, lots of things come up. I'll give you an example. We were doing a session, I think in Uttarakhand, with a bunch of government school girls, and speaking to those girls, and we're prepared for this. We know by virtue of the work that we've been doing for a while, we're prepared for this. The minute you talk about menstruation or somebody's first menstrual experience, it's an intimate story that they haven't had a chance to say in most of their lives, and that opens the world for a lot of things. So this girl will come up and tell you that, my uncle molested me, my uncle raped me, my maternal uncle, whoever it is. Or they will say that, they'll explain that they actually engaged in sex and they had fun doing that. Or they may say something like they've heard of a girl who was forced to get married just because she hit puberty. So, so the world really opens up to things that we can't imagine. And actually, unless we are prepared as an organization or the system is prepared to be able to take it, we're also triggering and activating a lot of things in those safe spaces. Right. And sometimes, let's say, conversations have gone where young girls have asked us, we've read about the fact that there is something called medical marijuana in the Western world. Does it apply for period pain? Does it, because I hurt a lot, and so on and so forth. And when we engage in dialogue like that, the sponsors have come and asked us, why are you talking about drugs? This is despite the fact that we haven't had any stance on whether one should use or should not use drugs whatsoever. It's more a discourse, right? So we get various kinds of flack because it opens up the world to other things that are particularly taboo, which is sex, drugs, so on and so forth. And it is always a hard bargain to also go up against corporations who are making bottom line selling disposable pads with a certain narrative again and again. So we get flack in various ways. I guess we exist only to kind of fight and tackle all of that.
Uh, well, we have Madhavan again. Yes, Madhavan, you have a question. Madhavan, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bharati, you were mentioning about creating awareness in the schools and teachers and nurses and all those things. No, I just want to check with you. Have you tried, so for example, any corporate saying that I need about 50 men from the crowd or from the company, so that let me have one session to discuss about this? If you have approached anything like that, what kind of a resistance you have come across?
So our experience there has been slightly varying. So some corporates have definitely, and I don't want to bucket them into anything, but I'll just anecdotally say that some of them have responded very kindly. Have said, we will throw out an invite to our employees. If you're insistent on holding a mixed gender group session, we will allow that. We will, in fact, actually do some sort of engagement with our employees to tell them why it's important for men also to engage with it. But that's been very few and far in our experience. A lot of them will say, no, we will host this session only for the women. And they will not give us room to be able to insist on it further. And many times we have to take a call on whether, one, we have a reach, we're able to take some of the skills we've built to these communities and to these corporates, and three, also to see if just bringing this dialogue in is more important for us than actually having all of the men also in the room. So it's been a very mixed experience. I think the younger startups in general and the more new age corporates, when I mean new age, where the age group is a little more younger, I feel like they're more receptive to it. But I don't want to still classify it. It's just a felt sense. So I'll just stop with that. But yes, it's happened. But there can be a lot more that can happen in that space.
Thank you.
Madhavan.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Madhavan. Bharti, one aspect which we have been talking about, such a wide topic, and we've been talking a lot about it, we didn't actually touch upon the helpline for women, Tech Saki, which you have been a part of. So we'd like to know about that before we get your parting notes.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to speak about Texaki. So Texaki is a helpline I led that's actually housed in an organization called Point of View. It's an informational helpline that basically takes information in Hindi, Bangla, Tamil, and Marathi to women, girls, trans, and people of various genders, particularly deal with the various kinds of issues they face online. And these issues, when I say that you're facing it online, it normally happens in a continuum. Let's say we're looking at a family where there is a certain gendered patriarchal way in which the family functions. So the husband might say, so you have money, why don't you share your GPay password? Or might control you on whom you can be friends with in Instagram or not. Or someone might be trying to defraud you or send you a loan scam. Or there might be stalkers, claiming to be that's you and talking to somebody else, impersonating you. Or someone might be having pictures of themselves to their surprise being morphed and then asked for money in various ways. So all of this falls under the larger realm of what we call technology facilitated gender based violence. Any sort of thing that happens in the real world gets perpetrated and maybe even amplified, with a lot of security and anonymity for the perpetrators to be able to do it in a digital medium. So Texaki was a helpline that helped people get information on how they could protect themselves, how they could avert themselves from such issues that happen to them, but also to take up the cases against giants like Facebook, Google, and to complain about it. And as simple as, I don't know how to navigate from tab to tab, help me do that. So it was present for various reasons. It is present for various reasons, but more particularly to make the digital world more egalitarian, to have more people inhabit the digital world. Because of course we have pretty much everyone having a smartphone, but just having a smartphone does not allow someone to be able to use it effectively for the needs that they have to live their lives. So that's what Texaki is.
Before we wind up, we'd like to have your parting notes about Just Seriously, today's session.
Sorry, were you asking me for my parting notes, Chris? I didn't follow that.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Actually, I think I'm really enjoying some of the questions that come my way. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's been a while since I've been on a podcast. I've actually been on a hiatus from work. So it's nice to speak, and thank you so much for the chance.
I'm sure that, yeah, thank you very much, Bharti. And I'm sure that a lot of people have a lot of questions. And in case they want to reach out to Boond, or in case they want to reach out to you, what would be the right way? Like LinkedIn, is it your account, or are you looking at the Boond website, or what are the ways to reach out to you?
I think the most effective way to reach us is the Instagram page on Boon. We're very active there. Our turnaround rates and responding back is quite high. But feel free to always reach out on LinkedIn or on our website. It will reach us, and we will get back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bharti, for the very enlightening session, I would really say, and really delighted to have you with us on Just Seriously. And Just Seriously, Poisoning Thoughts with me, Kriss Venugopal, every Thursday, nights 9:30 India time and 8 p.m. UAE time. And we'll be back with another person next week. And I'm sure, Bharti, there is a lot more to discuss, and probably we would invite you again so that we can discuss more on this and spread awareness about a topic which had been a taboo, and slowly it is changing shape. And wish you all good luck in spreading the awareness. And thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.